Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Pyramaze, Bloodlines, out June 23rd on AFM Records. The album has 10 tracks, 44 minutes in length, and this is the band's 7th full-length studio album. They are a Danish power metal band. I love the design of this record, and that's exactly what I want to say to start off this review. It's a design that feels perfect for the band, for their sound, and specifically for this album. A classic design, I would call it. The album starts off with an instrumental intro track called Bloodlines, a song that helps define what the overall sound experience is going to be like. Then it has a break in the middle, dividing side A from side B with the song Alliance, I would say a ballad/duet featuring Melissa Bonney. And then the record finishes off with Wolves of the Sea, a song that's nothing more, nothing less than a movie score. You honestly feel like you're watching Avatar or one of those epic movies, and that is the soundtrack that leads you into the movie or that leads you out of the movie, depending on where it sits. In this case, it leads you out because it's the closing track. But a massive song, nevertheless, to close off the record. So when you look at these three pillars, you can see the beginning, middle, and end of the record. You can see the definition of the design, the definition of the structure, but something that gives incredible playability, incredible quality, energy to the overall experience of going through the first all the way to the last song on this record. As far as the sound is concerned, let me start off by saying that this album is mixed, mastered, and was recorded by Jacob Hansen, who's also the guitar player on the band. And if you know Jacob Hansen, you know that everything that he touches has that golden touch. He has that Midas touch. There's never been an album that this guy has worked on that didn't sound great, and this one is no different. The album sounds phenomenal. Larger than life, massive sounding record, tons of texture, a lot of substance into the sound itself, never feeling hollow, never feeling empty, very modern in how it comes across and how it feels and how all the elements work with one another. But perhaps the winning factor in all of this is that this is an album that's not driven just by one piece of the puzzle. All of them have an important role to play, and how they combine with one another really is the DNA of the entire album. This is not a guitar-centric record. This is not an album that the drums overpower the sound. This is not an album where the keyboards become the be-end-all of everything sound-wise. This is an album that depends on all of these different pieces to come together in order to create texture, in order to create volume, in order to drive the songs, in order to create melody, in order to give the tracks ebbs and flows. All of them have their role. All of them intertwine perfectly. And the matter of in which they intertwine, it's really what gives life, energy, and soul to this overall record. And that's why the album feels so well defined from song to song. That's why the album sounds so good, and it's so easy to digest. Even though it has so many layers, even though the sound is so robust, so big, you still can feel everything coming to you in a very simplified format. And that makes the playability of the record skyrocket, because it gives playability to the individual songs. So great sounding record, really well defined, a really powerful sounding album, very modern, but not pushing the envelope into what we see now in terms of modern power metal records, where, for example, the keyboards take the lead. Now, the keyboards on this record are super important. I really like the size that they help give the songs. I like the melody that they infuse. I like the diversity that they offer and the texture that they give. But what I like the most about the keyboard sound and overall orchestrations on this record is that they just weave themselves with the rest of the sound. They become part of it. Sometimes you almost forget that they're there because they're not always in the forefront. They're not always driving this car. Sometimes they're just the passenger. And that is great. The ability to create a sound like that is what makes this record work so well across all 10 songs. Now, this is not to say that the guitars and drums don't play a role. I actually felt like guitars and drums together are the spinal cord of this album. The keyboards and orchestrations and the vocals, to a certain extent, is the nerval system. Those nerves that feed from that spinal cord and then allow everything else to come to life. That's pretty much the baseline design of how this album sounds. I really enjoyed the guitars. I felt like they had drive. I felt like they had melody. They had great energy, heavy at times, but also very explosive and melodic. an album that really gives them a sense of energy and a sense of direction, and therefore offers that to the tracks themselves. Now the drums feel big, they feel powerful, but they never overpowering the experience. They go as far as they can go, and they touch the guitars, and then they stay there. They don't surpass them, and they don't go too far beneath them. So they have a way of becoming almost the glue that keeps this record together, but a lot of the oomph of this album, a lot of the energy of this record, a lot of the size of this album, while might not necessarily end with a drum sound, because I really feel the keyboards is on the edge of that sound, but the drums are definitely the starter, the initiator of that size, the initiator of that volume. Vocally, this album is outstanding. I don't think I can say anything else. From start to beginning, the range, the delivery, the texture, the layers, very subtle layers at times, but they're still there in order to create volume that matches the volume of the sound, in order to give a little bit more presence when the vocals perhaps would feel very thin otherwise, but without having to change too much. You're still giving more presence, you're still giving more impact. I honestly really fell in love with the vocal performance. It sounded very organic, sounded very natural, very warm for an album like this, matching the overall energy and soundscape that the record gives. This is, without a shadow of a doubt, my favorite album from Pyramaze. And when I look at its predecessor, an album that I had a few gripes about, specifically the length, this one is perfect. 44 minutes, 10 songs, that ability to have beginning, middle, and end, a really well-defined design and a really well-defined structure with great sound experience, very driven, very, big and powerful and with great size. So it's a very robust record, but a record that doesn't have, noticeable flaws. And I think that's an important element, because even if there are flaws in the record, they become minimal and you can overcome them very easily because of how interesting the sound is and the songs are. As far as favorite tracks are concerned, I want to start off by talking about Taking What's Mine. Now, this is the second song on the record, and you get to understand the essence of the album a lot better once you hear this song. It's very melodic, it has symphonic elements, becoming a more symphonic, modern power metal song from the beginning all the way through. Now, it has a little bit more of a darker control experience in the verses, and then more explosive both musically and vocally in the chorus. A chorus that's super catchy, super hooky. The guitars often give a little bit more heaviness, a little bit more bite right at the end of the chorus. And the vocals soar throughout this entire song. Great layers, great texture. Next you have Even If You Were Gone. This song has some electronic elements that are really interesting, and you see them at the beginning of the track, and then you see them at times in the vocal performance. Outside of that, it's a track that still feels very robust. It has a lot of sound. The drums and guitars become the main course, if you will, and then the keyboards, the electronic elements, the orchestrations kind of weave themselves in and out, sometimes becoming the outside layers of the song, sometimes becoming the internal layers of the song with the drums and guitars overshadowing them. So it's a track that has a lot of internal movement, not necessarily ups and downs. It's not a super dynamic, it's not a roller coaster ride of a track, but it still has internal movement, which then gives movement to the overall feel of how the song comes together. Last but not least, The Midnight Sun, a more melodic and methodic track, specifically in the verses, and then with this big sound around it that becomes even bigger once you start to reach the chorus. The vocals really shine through this song, and the vocals really breathe. Outside of the duet with Melissa Bonney in the song Alliance, I felt like this is perhaps the track that manages to have big volume, but the vocals still have a sense of direction, and they still feel like they're there alone, even though there's so much sound around them. So it's a beautiful song because of that almost stripped down effect when it's not really a stripped down song, and the emphasis that's put on the vocal performance really shines through. This is it, Pyramaze with Bloodlines on June 23rd on AFM Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.